What's up everyone? So I actually just got my hands on the OnePlus 6 and I was about to do a still worth it video and all this stuff, but really there's no reason to do it because obviously this phone is still worth it. It just came out in May of 2018, not even like 5 months ago, but I kind of want to see how this phone holds up 5 months later. Obviously it's still worth it, but a lot of things have changed since this phone has came out. We're about to see a new OnePlus 6T coming out very soon, and this phone also got Android 9.0, which I'm running on it right now. So kind of seeing how it runs and everything like that. Now, like I said, this phone did come out in May of 2018. And if you aren't familiar with OnePlus at all, dude, this phone and this whole phone series is crazy. OnePlus as a company really has tried to give you more for less. And even ever since the OnePlus 1, I've owned that. I've owned the OnePlus 2, the OnePlus 3. I just purchased the OnePlus 5 and obviously the OnePlus 6. And all those phones that I've had were crazy. I believe I own the OnePlus 3T as well. I don't remember, but their whole OnePlus series is crazy. They try to bring the best value, and the OnePlus 6 right now is only $529, I believe, on their website. Now, this specific model is the 6GB variant, and it's not really for sale anymore. They completely sold out, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be able to bring back later. But they still have the 8GB RAM version as well, so that's pretty cool, man. But looking at the screen, one thing that I found out that was really crazy is I didn't know this panel was 1080p. So it's a 6.28 inch optic AMOLED display. I don't know why they call it optic. It's an OLED display. It's very, very good. And honestly, I thought it was like 1440p, which honestly, there's not a humongous difference between a 1440p screen and a 1080p screen. But I found that crazy. And the PPI was only 402, which isn't that big at all, really, if you think about it. But I think just in terms of the screen itself, I thought the screen was higher resolution than it is. It's a very sharp screen in my opinion. I thought it was higher resolution than even my iPhone 10. But again, you have to remember that it's different screen sizes, so it shows differently. But I just got that vibe from it. I don't know. But the screen is definitely good. Now, depending on how much you use your specific OnePlus, there could be burn-in, there could be not. But I don't think at this point, even if you're getting it used, you're definitely not going to run into any burn-in unless somebody just left their screen on the 24/7. Now, I did have Android 9.0 on it, and it seems like it's running perfectly fine. I don't really have any issues with it. One little thing to note, though, is that this isn't stock Android, but it's really close to stock. It's not like TouchWiz or anything, or LG's UI. OnePlus calls their software Oxygen OS, and it's actually very good. Even when I ran it on the OnePlus 1, it was very good. The OnePlus 2 was very good. And I like how it gives you some custom ROM functionalities, usually like double tap to wake and different things like that, where we don't usually see them on stock ROMs. We're starting to see it more often, but you can change a lot of stuff within Oxygen OS being stock without even flashing a custom ROM or anything, which is super cool, and I like that a lot. Now, I'm not too sure what Android 9.0 brings specifically to this phone, but like I said, you can have things like the navigation bar. You can change it up a little bit. You can do some quick gestures, like I said, double tap to wake. You can draw O, V, whatever, or S on the screen when the phone is off to kind of schedule different things to come on. So if you for example, draw O, you can have it open the camera, record a video, turn off flashlight, whatever. Or you can open an app, which is super cool. And small things like that really just make me so happy about the future of phones in general. And OnePlus, the fact that they're adding that type of functionality in the screen on stock without even having to flash or custom ROM is super cool. And I think I hinted at that on the OnePlus 1 or OnePlus 2 review that I did earlier this year. But yeah, man, I have nothing but respect for OnePlus for that. Now, in terms of the specs, this is where it's super cool, and it's kind of important to know. We have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chipset, an octa-core CPU clocked at 2.8 gigahertz, an Adreno 630 GPU, and depending on your variant, either 6GB of RAM or 8GB of RAM. Now, the model I have is the 6GB variant, it's 64GB, or you can opt in for the 128 or 256GB option and get 8GB of RAM with it, and that's super crazy. That's a lot of RAM. Even 6GB of RAM is super crazy. I mean, to give you an example, the Samsung Galaxy S9 that was released earlier this year only has 4GB of RAM. I say only, I mean, that's still a lot of RAM. But the Google Pixel 3 XL that just got released literally 2 weeks ago, not even, that had 4GB of RAM as well. So this phone costs less than both of those phones, brand new, and it has more RAM than that. Now, RAM isn't everything, but in terms of performance and everything, man, on Android 9.0, I've really had no problems with it. And I love how this phone already has Android 9.0, whereas on the Galaxy S9, that phone still does not have Android 9 yet. It's going to get it eventually, but obviously Samsung has to go and modify their software and just bloat that thing like crazy. But I'll say in terms of performance and everything, dude, even 5 months later, it's still very, very good. This phone is not going to be slow for a very long time. I was surprised even when I had the OnePlus 3 or the 3T. I don't really remember which one I had, but even that phone's performance was super good. And I don't believe that phone was supported anymore. I think it stopped getting supported Android 8 or Android 7 or something. But even on that phone, the performance is still very good, even 2 years later after it's done being supported. Whereas even on the OnePlus 6, This phone is just getting started. It's probably going to get Android 10 in my opinion. Maybe, I don't know. I could see them supporting this phone up until Android 10. Even if not, Android 9.1, if it gets support up until then, it's going to be very good. You're going to have no problems with it whatsoever, even having this phone a couple years after, just because you do get things like a fingerprint sensor and you do have a face unlock feature as well. Now, I don't really like it too much because it doesn't have a separate face sensor, just like, you know, on iPhone 10, they have Face ID. On this one, they just use the front camera, so it might be a little bit easier to like deflect or detect or whatever, but you do kind of have that option on this OnePlus 6, so that's very cool. Now, the camera is definitely very good on this thing as well. I mean, it's not like a camera will get worse the more you use it, unless you crack a feature or something like that. Like if you crack the lens, then obviously it's gonna get bad. But usually when a phone gets released, most of the problems within the phone are usually software, unless you have like a hardware problem. But the camera on this thing is very good. I've really had no problems whatsoever. Now, with a phone like this, I was expecting a couple more features within the camera app. And that's one thing that I've seen with a lot of Android devices. This is where Samsung really like knocks it out of the park. And I was kind of figuring when OnePlus was going to update this to Android 9, there would be some more camera features, but we just get the basics. We just get, you know, video, photo mode. Obviously, we have portrait mode, which is pretty good on this. You have slow motion, pro mode, which is pretty cool. You are able to pretty much modify every single thing manually if you want to. The white balance, the ISO, super cool things. So that's really, really cool in and of itself. I'll say that it does have more features within the camera app than Apple does on theirs on iOS, so that's a good thing. But I still was expecting a little bit more. I think this is where Samsung really knocks it out of the park. Even though they bloat their software like crazy and it's usually kind of annoying, the fact that they at least put so many features within the phone is pretty cool. It's a little bit overkill, I think, but their camera app is very good, I think. But OnePlus, the sensor itself is very good. You have a 16 megapixel sensor and a 20 megapixel sensor, and the main sensor does have OIS, and both lenses do kind of show a wide angle lens a little bit, so that's really cool. And the cool thing is you are able to shoot 4K at up to 60 frames per second, and you can shoot 1080p at up to 240 frames per second. Now, to put that in perspective, comparing it to the Google Pixel 3 XL once more, the Google Pixel 3 can only shoot 4K at 30 frames per second, and it's really not the main thing. Like, it's not the biggest deal ever. The Google Pixel 3 XL probably still has a better camera from what I'm hearing, but still, you know, just having the functionality of at least going up to 60 frames per second just future-proofs the phone even more, and it's not like you can change that with a software update later, you know, that's kind of a hardware thing. The OnePlus 6 is able to shoot it at those frame rates, and that's super cool. Now, in terms of the front camera, it does have a 16 megapixel wide-angle front lens as well. It shoots 1080p videos, and I think it's pretty good. Again, I don't use front cameras all that often. I'm pretty ugly. I feel like the wide angle effect of the lens, is pretty cool, and I like it. It gets more in a photo. When I compared it to my iPhone 10, I can definitely see that it gets more in a photo than what my iPhone 10 brings, but still, I respect my iPhone 10, and I respect the OnePlus 6 even more. 16 megapixels does seem like a little bit of overkill, but hey, the more megapixels, the better, you know, it's not like it can hurt anything. Now, another cool aspect of this phone that a lot of phone manufacturers are kind of, you know, overlooking nowadays is the battery life. Now, it does have a 3,300 mAh battery, and even 5 months later on Android 9 when I was comparing it, it still seems good. I really don't have too much to complain about in terms of battery life. I would have loved to see the 3500, but that's just me being petty. Weird thing though is that what I'm seeing, this phone does not have any wireless charging, which is kind of weird. It's okay though, it's not really that big of a deal. It does have USB Type-C, so you can always plug it into like that universal port. So if your other phones support USB-C, if your MacBook supports USB-C, you can just charge it through there. But it also has dash charging capability, so you can charge it up to whatever, I think it's like 50% in like 30 minutes or something, I don't really remember. But in terms of the stock battery, it's pretty good, I would say. It's not horrible. You can definitely get at least a day out of it. If I took my iPhone 10 usage and put it on this, I would definitely say a day, probably like a day and a half if I wanted to, just because the screen is 1080p. It's not really the sharpest, brightest screen. It is spec'd pretty heavy, but the screen is usually the thing that takes up the most power, and it's definitely a big screen, but it's not like resolution high or anything like that, so pretty respectable in terms of battery life. And even 5 months later, even a year later, you're not going to have any problems with it in terms of my opinion. Now, some other notable things to note, like I said, it does have the fingerprint sensor on the back, which is pretty cool. A lot of phones, you know, the iPhones, all these people, they're taking away fingerprint sensors, but the fact that OnePlus is still able to put it in such a small price tag is very respectable, and I appreciate that. You still have the ringer switch on the side, which I like. It's textured, and I love that. You also retain the headphone jack, which is pretty cool. I'm pretty sure with the OnePlus 60, they're going to take it away, but I might make a separate video on all the leaks and stuff on that. But you also have the power button on the right side and the volume buttons on the left side. And just overall, I mean, as a package, this phone still completely holds up. We've seen a lot of changes since the 5 months this phone's been out. We've got a new Android version. We have a new OnePlus 60 coming out in a couple weeks. And I'll say, in my opinion, whether you get this phone 5 months from now, whether you're you're watching this video next year in 2019 or even 2020, this phone is still very good. And if this phone does stop getting Android support, you guys can always just root it, custom ROM it, and just flash it to the latest software once ever a ROM comes out. But I'll say as a whole, man, I have much respect for OnePlus. The OnePlus 6 still holds up. And if you're planning on getting one or anything like that, I would honestly say probably wait until the OnePlus 6T comes out, and then the OnePlus 6 will be a little bit cheaper. But I don't know, dude, like the OnePlus 6 is still a very good phone. I would love to see how OnePlus tops this, just because it does look pretty good. It feels pretty premium. It doesn't feel cheap at all. If you are getting one, I would recommend getting the mirror black version, which is the one I have. Fingerprint sensor magnet like crazy. You could literally just look at it and it'll just start getting fingerprints everywhere. Like you won't even have to touch it. But I still love this design. It reminds me of the 7 Plus a lot. My verdict is 5 months later, this phone is still killing it, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you're in the marketplace for an Android phone at all, definitely recommend getting a OnePlus 6. But like I said, I would probably wait till the OnePlus 6T comes out, just because even if they don't even sell the OnePlus 6 anymore, the 6T will probably be around the same price, maybe like $50 more here and there. But it's going to be a better phone, and you can always pick up a OnePlus 6 in the used market, man. But that is pretty much it. This phone is still killing it, and I love it. If you guys have any questions or you want to have anything else to add, whether you want to say good things or bad things about the OnePlus 6, leave it down in the comment section below. I'd love to read your comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, Alpaca. I do a lot more iOS reviews, Android reviews, iPhone reviews. Check that channel out. I really appreciate it. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.